packed federal courtroom. A woman in a black turtleneck sits rigidly at the defendant's table. Cameras flash. The judge's voice fills the room. It was January 3rd, 2022, and the verdict had just come in. 11 counts of fraud. 11 counts of deceiving investors, doctors, and patients. They had trusted her with their lives. The woman sitting in that courtroom had once been on the cover of Fortune magazine. Forbes had called her the world's youngest female self-made billionaire. Steve Jobs himself had been her inspiration. Her name was Elizabeth Holmes, and for over a decade she had pulled off one of the most audacious frauds in American corporate history. But here is what makes her story different from every other fraudster you've ever heard about. She didn't start out wanting to deceive anyone. The question was never whether Elizabeth Holmes was lying. The question was, when did she know? The girl who wanted to change the world. Elizabeth Holmes was born in 1984. She grew up in a family that believed deeply in the idea of legacy. Her great-great-grandfather had founded a flour milling empire. Her father worked at Enron, yes, that Enron, before the company imploded. Ambition wasn't just encouraged in the Holmes household, it was expected. From childhood, Elizabeth was different, obsessive, focused in a way that made adults uncomfortable. When a relative asked what she wanted to be when she grew up, she didn't say doctor, she didn't say astronaut. She said she wanted to be a billionaire. She was accepted to Stanford University at 18. She studied chemical engineering, and it was there, in the laboratories of one of the most elite universities in the world, that the idea was born. Elizabeth had a deep fear of needles. She had also watched people she loved suffer through the slow and uncertain process of blood testing. Sometimes they waited days for results, sometimes weeks. She became obsessed with a single question. What if one drop of blood could tell you everything? It was a real problem. Blood testing was expensive, slow, and inaccessible to millions of people. If someone could solve it, truly solve it, they would save lives. Millions of them. Elizabeth Holmes dropped out of Stanford at 19. Using her tuition refund money, she founded a company called Theranos. The name combined the words therapy and diagnosis. She was going to revolutionize medicine. The timing was perfect. Silicon Valley was a place where the rules of reality felt optional. Move fast, disrupt, believe the impossible. Investors had made fortunes betting on people who sounded crazy. Elizabeth Holmes sounded crazy, but she also sounded brilliant. She wore black turtlenecks every single day. It was a deliberate choice. She had studied Steve Jobs. She studied his uniform, his presentation style, his ability to make people believe something was true through pure conviction. She even lowered her voice to sound more authoritative. She made intense eye contact. Some people found it magnetic, others found it deeply unsettling. And she was extraordinarily good at getting into rooms with powerful people. Henry Kissinger joined her board, George Shultz joined her board, James Mattis joined her board. These were not naive men. These were some of the most experienced and skeptical people in the world. And every single one of them believed her. By 2014, Theranos was valued at $9 billion. Elizabeth Holmes owned 50%. On paper, she was worth $4.5 billion. Forbes put her on their cover. Fortune put her on their cover. She spoke at the Clinton Global Initiative. She signed a deal with Walgreens. Theranos blood testing centers would appear in pharmacies across America. Real patients were using the machines. Real doctors were receiving results. Real medical decisions were being made. And the machines didn't work. They had never worked the way Elizabeth Holmes claimed. The Edison device could accurately run only a small number of tests, yet Theranos advertised more than 200. For most tests, Theranos secretly used conventional machines made by other companies, the same machines every other laboratory used. The entire technological revolution was a performance. Patients received false positives for cancer, false negatives for HIV. People made life-altering medical decisions based on unreliable results, sometimes dangerously wrong results. Inside Theranos, employees who raised concerns were fired. Some were threatened with lawsuits. A young lab director named Adam Rosendorf watched inaccurate results go out to patients. He felt powerless to stop it. Eventually, he quit. But by then, hundreds of thousands of tests had already been run. The fall, his name was John Carreyrou. He was an investigative journalist at the Wall Street Journal, and in 2015 he started making phone calls. What he found was staggering. Source by source, document by document, he uncovered a company held together by fear, litigation, and the force of one person's will. Former employees described a culture of fear. Scientists described being overruled by someone with no scientific background. The gap between what Theranos claimed and what it could actually do was not a gap. It was a canyon. The story was published in October 2015, and Theranos collapsed in slow motion. Elizabeth Holmes went on television. She called the allegations lies. She claimed Carreyrou was working with competitors. She said they wanted to destroy her. She fought every investigation, every regulator, every whistleblower for years. But federal investigators had already begun looking closely at Theranos. What they found was so serious that Elizabeth Holmes was banned from operating a clinical laboratory for 2 years. Theranos also lost its federal operating license. In 2018, the Department of Justice indicted Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos president Ramesh Balwani. The company was dissolved. The machines were shut down. The dream was over. At trial, Elizabeth Holmes offered a defense that shocked even her critics. She claimed that Ramesh Balwani had emotionally and psychologically abused her for years. She said she had been under his control, unable to act freely. The defense divided both the courtroom and the public. The jury deliberated for 7 days. They acquitted her on charges related to patients, but on charges related to investors, they found her guilty. She was sentenced to 11 years and 3 months in federal prison. Elizabeth Holmes was not the first person to sell a vision that didn't exist. Silicon Valley was built, in part, on believing in things before they were proven. Fake it until you make it wasn't just a phrase. For years, it was a philosophy. But there is a line, and Elizabeth Holmes crossed it. The moment a real patient received a wrong result, the moment that patient made a real decision based on it, that was the moment the vision became a lie. A lie told to people who had no way of knowing they were being deceived. She wanted to change the world. Perhaps, in the beginning, she truly believed she could. The tragedy of Elizabeth Holmes is not that she failed. It is that she refused to admit failure. And in doing so, she transformed failure into something that hurt innocent people. And somewhere, in a federal prison in Bryan, Texas, there is a woman in a black turtleneck. She has 11 years to think about where the dream ended and where the deception began. If she even knows. What do you think? Was Elizabeth Holmes a visionary who lost control of her ambition, or did she know the truth from the very beginning? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoy deep dives into the world's biggest scandals, frauds, and untold stories, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next story might be even more unbelievable than this one.